Horrifying. A man once knelt down, begging for forgiveness in front of his wife. Tears streaming down the face that once made an entire city tremble in fear. But what sends chills down your spine isn't those tears. It's the horrifying secret he kept hidden through hundreds of nights while she slept peacefully in his arms. He imprisoned, mentally tortured, and let her ex-husband slowly die in a windowless concrete room, just for daring to threaten his family. And the most terrifying part, when she discovered the truth, she still chose to stay. Do you dare hear the rest of this story about a love built on blood, revenge, and forgiveness so bone-chilling it will haunt you? This is the story of Sarah and Ethan, and it will force you to ask yourself, where exactly is the line between love and monster? Before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel Alex Truths and like this video. Every subscription, like, and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth, so we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotions or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. Alright, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. The coffee had gone cold 30 minutes ago, but I kept my thin fingers wrapped around the paper cup anyway, as if the faint warmth could somehow steady the constant ache in my back. It was early October, 2025, and the coffee shop just off the Las Vegas Strip, one of those chain places called Brew and Bean, with bright lights and overpriced pastries, hummed with the usual afternoon crowd tourists, in flashy t-shirts snapping photos, locals in business, casual scrolling phones, and the occasional high roller in a tailored suit who looked like he owned the city. I didn't belong here. I never had. My name is Sarah Mitchell, 27 years old, 7 months pregnant, and so bone-tired that every breath felt like lifting weights. The maternity jeans I'd bought secondhand from a thrift store on Fremont Street were already too tight around my hips, the elastic waistband digging into skin. Stretched thin from months of barely eating enough, my oversized gray hoodie, faded from too many washes in the laundromat sink, did nothing to hide the swell of my belly anymore. I'd stopped trying. What was the point? No one looked at me with kindness these days. They looked through me, or worse, at me with pity or disgust. The laptop in front of me was an ancient thing screen cracked in one corner, fan wheezing like it might give up any second. I was trying to finish a batch of medical billing claims for a small doctor's office that paid me piecework $10 per form, processed correctly, minus deductions if I made even one typo. Rent was due in 5 days, and I was short $273. Again. The electric bill had arrived yesterday with a bright red final notice stamp. I hadn't turned on the heat in my tiny one-room apartment in a rundown complex off Charleston Boulevard since last week, even though the nights were already dipping into the 50s. Cold seeped through the thin walls, through the single blanket I owned through me. Sleep came in fits, 3 hours, here, 2 there, interrupted by hunger pangs, back spasms, and the constant worry that gnawed at the edges of my mind like a rat in the walls. I rubbed my eyes trying to focus on the spreadsheet. The baby kicked hard, a sharp jab under my ribs that made me gasp softly. I pressed a palm to the spot, whispering, "Easy, little one. Mama's trying." My voice was soft, almost apologetic, the way it always got when I spoke to the baby, like I was asking permission to exist. That's when I heard him. "Sarah! Holy hell! Is that really you?" The voice sliced through the cafe noise like a knife. I knew it instantly. Derek Harlan, my ex-husband, the man who'd spent 4 years convincing me I was worthless, then walked out the day after I told him I was pregnant with someone else's child. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, quick and ugly, no alimony, no nothing. I'd thought I'd never see him again. I looked up slowly, dread pooling in my stomach like ice water. Derek stood 3 feet from my table, blonde hair perfectly styled, blue eyes narrowing as they took me in. He wore a crisp button-down shirt and slacks that screamed money, probably from his new job selling luxury cars on the Strip. Beside him stood a woman half my age, thin and polished, in a tight red dress and heels that clicked like accusations. "Wow," Derek said, his mouth twisting into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I almost didn't recognize you. You've changed." Heat flooded my face. The cafe noise seemed to fade, conversations dimming as heads turned. I felt every eye on me, on my cheap hoodie, my swollen ankles visible above, worn sneakers, the way my hands shook as I tried to close the laptop. "Derek," I managed, voice barely above a whisper. Timid, polite. The way I'd learned to speak to him to avoid making things worse. "I didn't know you came here." "I don't usually." His gaze dropped to my belly, lingered, then flicked back up with mock concern. Clearly you do, though. When did this happen? The woman beside him shifted, manicured hand sliding around his arm possessively. She looked me up and down, slow, deliberate, calculating. I registered as zero threat. I should get back to work, I said, reaching for my laptop. My fingers trembled so badly I nearly knocked over the cold coffee. Derek stepped closer, blocking the narrow booth exit. Come on, don't be like that. I'm just surprised, that's all. He glanced at his girlfriend, then back at me. You look different. Heavier. A lot heavier. I mean, I know the divorce hit you hard, but stress eating isn't the answer, Sarah. You really should take care of yourself. For the kids' sake. The words landed like punches. My throat closed. The cafe shrank around us, exposed brick walls pressing in, Edison bulbs blurring overhead. I was suddenly aware of every person who might be listening, every phone that might be recording, every whisper that might turn into laughter later. I'm not stress eating, I said, voice cracking, despite my effort to keep it steady. No, his eyebrows lifted in exaggerated surprise. Then what's the excuse? You used to be so careful. Remember when you wouldn't even touch carbs after 6, and now? He gestured vaguely at my whole body, at the life I'd been forced to carry alone. Look at you. The girlfriend laughed, a light tinkling sound that made my hands curl into fists under the table. Derek, leave her alone, she said, not sounding like she meant it. Maybe she's just happy now. Happy. Derek snorted. Is that what we're calling it? I tried to stand, but my legs felt like water. The pregnancy made me slower, clumsier. Derek knew it. He positioned himself deliberately, blocking me in like he always had. Excuse me, I whispered. I need to go. Where? Back to that dead-end billing job. Or maybe another night in that roach motel you call an apartment. He leaned against the table, casual like we were old friends. I heard you're scraping by on freelance stuff. Must pay great judging by. Everything. His gesture took in my entire existence. The threadbare hoodie, the cracked laptop, the untouched cup of the cheapest drip coffee. They sold $2.99 black, no sugar, because sugar cost extra. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if sensing my panic. I pressed a hand to my stomach, feeling the small life push back, and wished I could disappear. Then a new voice cut through the air, low-controlled, with a quiet authority that made the entire cafe seem to pause. The lady asked you to move. I looked up. The man standing behind Derek was taller, broader, fair-skinned, with sharp features and dark hair cut close. He wore a charcoal suit that fit like it had been made for him, expensive, understated power. His eyes were steel gray, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. 2 other men in similar dark suits stood a few paces back, watching with calm readiness. Derek stiffened, turned. Sorry, buddy, this is private. She's my ex-wife. We're just catching up. No, the man said simply. His gaze flicked to me, brief assessing, then back to Derek. You're leaving. It wasn't a request. It was fact. Derek's jaw tightened. Look, I don't know who you think you are. The man didn't respond, didn't move. But the air changed colder, heavier. One of his companions shifted slightly, hand resting near his hip. Derek's girlfriend tugged his arm. Derek, let's go, she whispered. Yeah. Derek forced a laugh. Good seeing you, Sarah. Really watch what you eat, though. For the baby's sake. He walked away fast, girlfriend's heels clicking behind him. The stranger watched them go, then turned to me. You okay? I managed to nod, though my hands shook violently. I clasped them in my lap. Thank you. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. He gestured to the empty seat across from me. May I? Every instinct screamed, no, don't accept help from a man who moved like he owned the shadows. But my legs wouldn't hold me. Dizziness washed over me, numbness creeping up my arms. I felt like I might faint right there. Okay, I whispered. He sat, movements precise, economical. Up close, I saw faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. Late 30s, maybe. He carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from never needing to prove anything. I'm Ethan, he said quietly. No last name. Ethan Caldwell. Sarah. My voice was small, timid. Sarah Mitchell. Sarah. He repeated it like he was tasting the weight of it. That man. Your ex-husband. Yes. The word tasted bitter. He's an asshole. A startled, shaky laugh escaped me, surprising us both. Yeah. He is. Ethan flagged down the barista, a young woman who appeared instantly. Fresh latte for the lady. Hot this time. And water. I'm fine, really, I protested softly. You're shaking. His tone left no room for argument. The barista returned quickly with a steaming latte and ice water. I wrapped my hands around the cup, letting heat seep into my palms. Tears pricked my eyes, embarrassment, relief, confusion, all crashing together. "Thank you," I whispered. "For the coffee. And for before." "I have a sister," Ethan said, expression softening just a fraction. "Two, actually. I know what it looks like when a man tries to make a woman feel small." We sat in silence for a moment. Around us, the cafe resumed its rhythm, oblivious. Derek and his girlfriend were at a window table now, his back deliberately turned. "Is he the father?" Ethan asked quietly. "No," the answer came fast. "The father signed away rights the moment he found out. Wanted nothing to do with this." I gestured at my belly, the life Derek had just mocked into something shameful. The certainty in Ethan's voice made my throat tighten. I took a sip of the latte, rich, warm, the first real thing I'd tasted in days. It grounded me. "I should let you get back to whatever you were doing," I said, glancing toward the two men still standing nearby. "Where do you live?" he asked. The question should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt practical. "North Las Vegas, a small place off Cheyenne. Not far." "Let me drive you home." "That's not necessary." "Maybe not." Ethan stood, pulling a heavy cream card from his jacket and placing it between us. Just his name, Ethan Caldwell, and a phone number embossed in gold. "But I'm offering. My car's outside." I stared at the card. It felt like a lifeline I didn't deserve. "I have a bus pass," I said weakly. "You shouldn't ride the bus when you're this upset." He was right. My hand still shook. The thought of the bumpy ride, the stairs, made my stomach churn. "Okay," I whispered. "Thank you." His black SUV waited at the curb, hazard lights on, as if parking rules didn't apply. One of his men opened the back door. I climbed in, sinking into leather seats that smelled like new money. Ethan slid in beside me, gave my address to the driver in that same calm voice. As we pulled into traffic, the glittering strip lights blurred past the tinted windows. I watched them, heart pounding. "Your ex," Ethan said quietly. "Does he bother you often?" "No. Not since the divorce. I didn't even know he came to that coffee shop. But he knows where you live." "No. I moved after. He doesn't have the new address." "Good." Ethan settled back. "Keep it that way." Silence stretched. The city slid by, neon noise, wealth I could never touch. "What do you do?" I asked, finally, voice soft. "For work, I mean. Construction. Development. I manage projects around the city, big ones." It sounded normal, but the way he said it, careful, neutral, made me wonder what lay beneath. "And you?" he asked. "Medical billing, freelance. Whatever pays." I couldn't remember the last time someone asked like they cared. "That's hard work." "It is." My voice cracked. "But I can do it from home. Flexible. For when the baby comes." "When are you due?" "January." "Early January." Ethan nodded, processing. The SUV pulled up outside my building, a squat, peeling complex with flickering hallway lights, and a broken elevator that had been out of service for 8 months. I clutched my things. "Thank you. Really. For everything." Ethan handed me another card identical, but with a personal cell number written on the back in neat handwriting. "If you need anything," he said. "If he shows up. If you just need someone to call. Use this." "I will." I probably wouldn't, but the gesture eased something tight in my chest. "I mean it, Sarah." His gray eyes held mine. "Anytime. For any reason." I nodded, climbed out before tears could fall. I made it to my door, cheap wood peeling paint before the SUV pulled away. Inside, I collapsed against the wall, sliding to the floor in the dark, cold apartment. The card burned in my pocket, heavy as a promise. And in that moment, amid the hunger, the fear, the crushing weight of my life, something shifted. A spark. Dangerous, impossible, but real. 2 weeks had crawled by since that afternoon in Brew and Bean, 2 weeks during which the memory of Ethan Caldwell refused to fade. I carried his card everywhere, the heavy cream stock tucked inside the cracked wallet that held my last $23 and a faded ultrasound picture. I told myself I would never use the number. I told myself a man like that, quiet power radiating from every measured movement, didn't belong in a life as small and broken as mine. Yet every night when the wind howled through the gaps around my single window, and the radiator clanked uselessly without producing heat, my fingers would brush the card and my heart would stutter. It was the 17th of October, 2025. The sky over North Las Vegas was the color of old concrete, heavy with the threat of rain that never quite arrived. I had just returned from the corner market with 2 cans of generic beans, a half loaf of day-old bread, and a single apple, the last of the produce marked down because it was already softening. My grocery bag tore on the cracked stairs leading to the 3rd floor. The apple rolled away and disappeared under the railing into darkness. I stood there staring after it, throat tight. 1 apple, One small bruised piece of fruit. Gone. Inside the apartment, the air smelled of damp plaster and the faint metallic tang of the space heater I could no longer afford to run. I set the cans on the counter, $3.87 total, and felt the familiar wave of dizziness sweep over me. I gripped the edge of the chipped formica until my knuckles turned white. The baby moved restlessly, a slow roll that pressed against my ribs and reminded me how little fuel I had to give. I was sitting at the folding table that doubled as my desk, trying to focus on another stack of medical billing forms when the knock came. Not the soft rap of a neighbor. This was deliberate 3 firm knocks that echoed through the thin door like judgment. I froze. My heart slammed against my sternum so hard I tasted copper. Another 3 knocks. Louder. I rose slowly, legs unsteady, and peered through the peephole. A man in a dark suit stood in the hallway, mid-40s, expressionless, holding a thick manila envelope. My stomach plummeted. I opened the door, only a crack keeping the chain on. "Yes, Sarah Mitchell." His voice was flat, professional. "Yes." He extended the envelope through the gap. "You've been served." The words landed like a slap. I took the packet automatically, fingers numb. The door closed. Footsteps retreated down the hall. I slid the chain back into place with shaking hands. The envelope was heavy. Expensive paper. My name typed in stark black letters across the front. I tore it open with clumsy fingers. 3 pages of dense legal language. Words swam. Petition to establish paternity. Emergency motion for temporary custody. Allegations of fraudulent concealment. During dissolution proceedings. Request for immediate DNA testing. Claim of biological. Fatherhood. Derek. He was claiming the baby was his. He was saying I had hidden the pregnancy during the divorce to deprive him of his rights. He wanted custody temporary at first, then permanent. He wanted child support from me retroactive. He demanded I appear at a hearing in 19 days. 19 days. The room tilted. I staggered to the couch, really just a sagging futon mattress on the floor, and sank down. My vision tunneled. The papers slipped from my hands and scattered across the threadbare carpet. He knew I had nothing. No money for a lawyer. No savings. No family who would take my calls anymore. This wasn't about the baby. This was punishment. Pure, calculated cruelty. A sob clawed up my throat. I swallowed it down, pressed both hands to my stomach as though I could shield the life inside me from what was coming. The baby kicked hard, insistent, as if saying, "I'm here, Mama. I'm real." "I know," I whispered. "I know." But I didn't know how to fight this. I didn't even know how to begin. The apartment felt smaller, colder. The single bulb overhead flickered, throwing shadows that looked like fingers reaching across the walls. I thought of the nights I'd already spent curled under the one thin blanket, teeth chattering, telling myself it was only temporary. I thought of the mornings I woke, so hungry the room spun. I thought of the way the other tenants looked at me, pitying, judging, avoiding. And I thought of Ethan Caldwell. His face swam into focus, those steel-gray eyes, the quiet certainty in his voice. Any time. For any reason. My hand moved to my pocket before I could talk myself out of it. The card was still there, edges slightly worn from being handled so often. I stared at the handwritten cell number on the back. I shouldn't. I couldn't. But 19 days. 19 days until a judge decided whether my child would be taken from me by a man who had once told me I was nothing. My thumb hovered over the screen of my ancient phone, the one with the cracked glass, and the battery that died if I looked at it wrong. I pressed call. It rang twice. Then his voice, low, calm, instantly alert despite the late hour. "Sarah." The sound of my name in his mouth stole my breath. "I'm sorry," I blurted, words tumbling over each other. "I know it's late. I shouldn't have called. I didn't know who else. And the papers say 19 days, and I can't afford a lawyer, and he's saying the baby is his, even though he signed away everything, and he wants custody, and I'm scared. He'll actually take my baby and I don't have anything left." "Stop." The word was gentle but firm. "Take a breath." I did. Air rattled into lungs that felt bruised. "Now tell me slowly." "What papers?" So I did. I told him about the envelope waiting against my door like a loaded gun. I told him about the forged claims, the emergency motion, the demand for a DNA test at a lab of Derek's choosing. I told him how the words blurred together, how each line felt like another brick being laid over my chest. Silence followed long enough that panic flared fresh. Then Ethan spoke, voice quieter, now threaded with something dangerous and tightly leashed. "Where are you right now? Home. My apartment. Send me the address. I'm coming over." My heart lurched. "No, that's not necessary. I just wanted to ask if you maybe knew someone who..." "Sarah." My name again, spoken like a complete sentence, like a tether. "Send the address." 23 minutes later, there was a knock, soft, deliberate. I opened the door with trembling hands. Ethan stood in the hallway, still wearing a charcoal suit as though he had never gone home from whatever business had occupied him earlier. His fair skin looked almost luminous under the flickering hallway light. Behind him, one of the men from the coffee shop waited silently, expression blank. Ethan's gaze swept the apartment in one economical glance. The peeling linoleum, the futon on the floor, the stack of unpaid bills held down by a chipped coffee mug, the baby clothes I'd bought secondhand folded in careful piles on the Bess's counter. He stepped inside without asking, closed the door behind him. "Show me the papers." I handed them over, watched his face as he read. Nothing changed outwardly, same controlled features, same steady breathing, but his jaw tightened when he reached the second page, and something dark flickered in those gray eyes on the third. "This is harassment," he said, setting the packet down with careful precision. "Everything in here is designed to terrify you into folding." "It's working," I whispered. He looked at me, then really looked, and the force of his attention made my knees buckle. I caught myself on the back of the folding chair. "That's why we're going to end it." He pulled out his phone, typed rapidly, then met my eyes again. "I have lawyers, the best in the state. They'll handle this. I can't pay, I'm not asking you to." He raised a hand before I could protest. "Consider it done. That's too much." "I can't accept. Can you fight this alone?" The question hung between us, brutal in its simplicity. I shook my head, tears spilling over before I could stop them. "No." "Then let me help you." I stared at him, this stranger who had already given me more kindness in one afternoon than I'd received in years. My voice came out small, broken. "Why?" For the first time, something cracked in his composure. A shadow passed across his face, remorse, maybe, or guilt so deep it had carved permanent grooves. "I told you I have sisters," he said quietly. "One of them. She was 23, pregnant. The man disappeared the second she told him. She had nothing, no degree, no savings, no one. Our mother was already gone. I was 20 when I watched her cry herself to sleep every night because she thought she had failed her child before it was even born." His voice roughened. "I swore then if I ever had the power to keep another woman from feeling that same terror, I would use it." The honesty in his words pierced me. I pressed a hand to my mouth, trying to hold back the sob that wanted to escape. Is she okay now?" I asked, voice trembling. "She's a corporate attorney in Reno. Her daughter graduates high school next spring." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "She's more than okay. But she shouldn't have had to survive that alone, and neither should you." I looked down at the legal papers lying on my table like a death sentence, then back at Ethan. At this man who had stepped between me and humiliation without hesitation. At this man who was offering me a way out of drowning. "Okay," I whispered. I'll accept the help." Relief moved through his features, subtle but real. He pulled another card from his jacket, wrote something on the back, and handed it to me. "That's my private line. Not the office. If anything happens before tomorrow, if Derek contacts you, if you feel unsafe, call me. Immediately. I will." He moved toward the door, paused. "And Sarah," I looked up. "Stop thanking me. You're not begging for charity. You're accepting help you've earned the right to receive. There's no shame in survival." After he left, the apartment felt different. Still cold, still small, but no longer quite so suffocating. I sank onto the futon, pulled the thin blanket around my shoulders, and placed both hands over my belly. The baby rolled gently as though settling. "We're going to be okay," I whispered into the darkness. For the first time in months, the words didn't taste like a lie. The morning after Ethan left my apartment felt like waking inside someone else's dream. It was still October 2025, the 21st to be exact, and the sky above North Las Vegas was the same flat, indifferent, gray. But everything else had shifted. The envelope of legal papers still sat on the folding table like a sleeping snake, yet the terror that had choked me the night before had dulled to a low, constant ache. I kept waiting for the numbness to lift, and the panic to rush back in full force. It didn't, not entirely. I had barely slept. The thin blanket was no match for the wind that rattled the window frame all night, and every time I closed my eyes I saw Derek's face, his mocking smile in the coffee shop, the cold certainty in the legal documents. My body hurt in new places, ribs from the baby's restless movements, lower back from standing too long at the kitchen counter pretending to work, stomach hollow from the half can of beans I'd forced down at 3 a.m. My reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror showed a stranger, cheek-sunken eyes ringed with purple shadows, hair dull and tangled. I looked like someone who had already lost. At 8:47, the phone buzzed against the chipped countertop. Unknown number. My heart leapt into my throat. I answered with a whisper. Hello, Sarah, this is Sophia Caldwell, Ethan's sister. I'm an attorney. He asked me to take your case immediately. I'm outside your building. May I come up? I glanced around the apartment. The peeling paint, the futon mattress on the floor, the single light bulb dangling naked from the ceiling. Shame burned through me, hot and sudden. It's not much of a place, I said softly. I've seen worse, she answered, voice matter of fact but not unkind. We're not here to judge the wallpaper. We're here to make sure your ex-husband never gets within 100 feet of you or your child again. I swallowed. Okay. 3 minutes later, she knocked, firm, professional. I opened the door. Sophia was perhaps 40, dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail charcoal blazer over a cream silk blouse heels that clicked with authority on the cracked linoleum. She carried a leather briefcase and a calm that seemed to absorb the chaos around her. Behind her stood one of Ethan's men, silent, watchful. She stepped inside without hesitation, gaze sweeping the room once, then settling on me. You look exhausted, she said plainly. When was the last time you ate something with actual protein? I blinked, startled. Last night. Beans. She nodded once, opened her briefcase, and pulled out a thick folder. Sit. We have work to do. I sank onto the folding chair. She took the other, opened the folder, and began. Within 40 minutes, she had dismantled Derek's petition piece by piece. The alleged paternity documents were clumsy. Forgeries, dates, mismatched notary stamp, questionable medical timeline, impossible given the final divorce decree. She had already obtained certified copies of the relinquishment papers the biological father had signed 8 months earlier. Conception dates from my prenatal records proved the pregnancy postdated the divorce by nearly 3 months. The emergency custody motion was baseless, the fraud claim laughable in legal terms. This will be over before the hearing, she said, closing the folder. We're filing a response today with a motion to dismiss and a counterclaim for sanctions and harassment. He'll be lucky if he isn't ordered to pay your legal fees. I stared at her throat too tight to speak. She studied me for a long moment. Ethan told me you do medical billing. Yes. Freelance. He'd like to offer you full-time remote work. Legitimate contracts for several of his construction companies billing coding insurance claims. The pay starts at $35 an hour, 40 hours guaranteed plus benefits once you've been with us 90 days. You'd report directly to me for oversight. The number struck me like a physical blow. $35 an hour. More in 1 week than I sometimes made in a month. I shook my head, automatic. I can't. I don't. I'm not qualified for. You already do the work, she interrupted gently. You're meticulous. Ethan had me pull samples of your recent invoices. They're cleaner than half the firms we've used before. This isn't charity. It's business. My vision blurred. I pressed the heels of my hands to my eyes. Why is he doing this? Sophia's expression softened just a fraction. Because he watched me go through something similar when I was younger, and because he believes some things are worth protecting even if the world tells him otherwise. She stood. I'll need you to come to our office tomorrow morning. Downtown. I'll send a car at 8:30. Bring whatever documents you have, prenatal records, divorce decree, anything. We'll finalize the employment paperwork then. I nodded, numb. At the door she paused. Sarah, yes, eat something today. Please, you're carrying more than yourself now. After she left, the apartment felt even smaller, the silence louder. I sat on the futon for a long time, staring at the closed door, feeling the weight of kindness I didn't know how to carry. The next morning the car arrived precisely at 8:30. A black SUV, spotless driver, polite and silent. I wore the only clean outfit I had, left maternity jeans that were now visibly worn at the knees, a long-sleeved thermal shirt I'd bought for $3 at a discount bin, and the same gray hoodie from the coffee shop day. I felt like a stain against the leather seats. The office was on the 23rd floor of a glass tower overlooking the Strip. Marble lobby. Security who knew my name before I spoke it. The elevator opened directly into a suite of offices that smelled faintly of fresh coffee and expensive wood. Sophia met me at reception, handed me a steaming mug of tea, real tea, not the generic bags. I bought 5 for $1, and led me to a conference room. Ethan was already there. He stood when I entered, tall, fair-skinned, charcoal suit, impeccable. The moment our eyes met, something inside my chest cracked open. Heat rushed through me, sudden and terrifying. His gaze held mine for 1 heartbeat longer than necessary, and in that second I saw it something raw, unguarded, almost pained. Then the mask slipped back into place. Sarah, he said, voice low. Thank you for coming. I managed a small nod, voice barely audible. Thank you for everything. We sat. Sophia spread documents across the polished table: employment contract, non-disclosure agreement, direct deposit forms. The salary line made my stomach twist. $35 per hour, 40 hours minimum, overtime at time and a half. Health insurance, paid leave after 90 days, a signing bonus of $2,000 to assist with immediate needs. I stared at the figures until they blurred. Ethan watched me quietly. When I finally looked up, his expression was unreadable, but his hands were clenched on the table, knuckles white. "You don't have to accept," he said. "There's no obligation." The gentleness in his voice undid me. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Why me?" He looked away for a moment out the floor-to-ceiling windows, at the glittering city below. When he spoke again, his voice was rougher. "Because the night I watched my sister cry herself to sleep, knowing she might lose her baby to a system that didn't care, something broke inside me. I swore I'd never stand by again while someone suffered the same way. And then I saw you in that coffee shop trying to disappear, trying to protect your child with nothing but your own body, and I couldn't walk away. I wouldn't." His words landed like stones in still water, rippling through every hollow place inside me. I signed the papers with shaking hands. Sophia gathered the documents. "First assignment will be emailed tonight. Take the rest of the day. Rest." When she left the room, Ethan remained. He stood, walked to the window, hands in his pockets. His shoulders were tense, violent tension beneath the perfect tailoring. "I have to tell you something," he said without turning. "My business, it isn't only construction. There are parts of it that live in shadows, parts that make enemies. If you work for me, if you stay near me, those shadows might touch you." Fear spiked through me, sharp cold. "Are you dangerous?" He turned then. The look on his face was almost anguished. "I try not to be, not to the people who matter, but the world I move in doesn't always give me the choice." I stood on unsteady legs, walked closer, drawn by something I couldn't name. "Then why help me?" I asked, voice trembling. "If it puts me in danger. Because the moment I saw you, something inside me woke up that I thought had died years ago." His voice dropped to a raw whisper. "And I'd rather burn than let you face this alone." The air between us crackled, electric, dangerous, alive. I took another step. He didn't move. I lifted my hand slowly, hesitantly, and placed it against his chest over the steady, powerful beat of his heart. He exhaled sharply, as though I'd burned him. "Sarah," he said, almost a plea. I looked up into those storm-gray eyes and felt the world tilt again, not from hunger, not from fear, but from something far more terrifying. Hope. And beneath it, burning the first dangerous spark of something deeper, something that could consume us both. The first paycheck arrived on the 28th of October, 2025, direct deposit, at 6:37 in the morning, while I was still lying awake on the futon, staring at the water stain spreading across the people, sealing like an accusation. The notification chimed on my phone, soft and ordinary, as though the universe had not just shifted beneath me. $1,400. For 2 weeks of work I had done from the same folding table wrapped in the same thin blanket because turning on the space heater cost money I no longer needed to hoard. I stared at the number until my vision blurred, then pressed the heel of my hand against my mouth to keep the sob inside. I had never seen that much money in my account at one time. Not once. The second check would come in 14 days. And the third, and the fourth. The contract promised it. Sophia had explained the benefits package again yesterday over the phone: prenatal coverage beginning immediately, dental vision, even a small life insurance policy that named the baby as beneficiary if anything happened to me. I had cried then too quietly so she wouldn't hear, but the money couldn't warm the apartment. It couldn't erase the nights I still woke gasping from dreams where Derek stood over the crib with legal papers in his hand. It couldn't quiet the voice inside me that whispered I didn't deserve this, that sooner or later the world would remember who I really was and take it all away. Ethan called the next afternoon. His voice through the speaker was low, careful, like he was afraid of startling me. "Sarah, how are you feeling?" I curled tighter under the blanket, phone pressed to my ear. "Better. The nausea is less. Thank you for asking." A pause. Then quieter. "I'd like to see you. Not at the office. Somewhere quiet." My heart stuttered fear and something hotter, brighter, curling low in my stomach. "Where?" "There's a small park near your neighborhood. Desert Willow Park. Tomorrow at 4. Just to talk." I hesitated. I don't have anything nice to wear." "You don't need anything nice. Just come as you are." The next day, the wind was sharp, carrying the smell of coming rain and exhaust from the nearby freeway. I wore the same maternity jeans, the same thermal shirt, the same gray hoodie. My sneakers were splitting along the sides. Every step pinched my toes. I had combed my hair and braided it loosely, the best I could manage. My reflection in the cracked mirror had looked small, tired, hopeful in a way that frightened me. He was already there when I arrived, standing beneath a bare desert willow tree, hands in the pockets of a charcoal wool coat that probably cost more than every piece of furniture I owned combined. Fair skin flushed slightly from the cold. When he saw me, his entire posture changed, shoulders dropping, eyes softening in a way that made my chest ache. "Sarah." He said my name like a prayer. We walked slowly along the cracked path. Gravel crunched underfoot. Children shouted from the distant playground, their voices thin in the wind. He spoke first. "Sophia says the counterclaim is filed. Derek's attorney has already asked for an extension. He's stalling. It won't help him." I nodded, throat tight. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. It won't. Not this time. Silence stretched between us, comfortable and terrifying all at once. Then he stopped walking. Turned to face me. "I need to tell you something else," he said, voice rougher now. Something I should have said before. I braced myself. "I've spent most of my life building walls," he continued. "Around my family. Around my business. Around myself. Because the things I've done, the choices I've made, mean there are people who would hurt anyone close to me just to prove a point. I've always accepted that. Until you." My breath caught. "When I saw you in that coffee shop," he said, something cracked inside me. I told myself it was just conscience. Just guilt over my sister's past. But it wasn't. It was you. The way you held yourself together with nothing but your own hands. The way you protected your baby even when you could barely stand. I wanted to burn the world down for you right then. And every day since, the feeling has only gotten worse. He took a step closer. The space between us shrank to inches. "I don't expect anything," he said, voice almost breaking. "I know what I am. I know the shadows I carry. But I need you to know that from the moment I looked at you, I've been fighting a war inside myself not to fall completely. And I'm losing." My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it might bruise them. "Ethan." He reached out slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from my cheek. His fingers were warm against my cold skin. "I want to protect you," he whispered. "Not just from Derek. From everything. From cold apartments and empty refrigerators and nights when you can't sleep because the wind is louder than your own heartbeat. I want to give you safety. I want to give you time. I want to give you whatever pieces of me are still worth giving." Tears slipped down my face before I could stop them. "I'm scared," I admitted, voice trembling. "I've never had anyone want to keep me safe before. I don't know how to trust it." "I know." His thumb traced the path of a tear. "But I'll wait. As long as it takes." The wind picked up, whipping my braid against my cheek. Somewhere nearby, tires screeched, sharp, sudden. Ethan's body tensed instantly. He turned, positioning himself between me and the parking lot. Two men in dark jackets had stepped out of a black sedan. One of them I recognized, low-level player from a rival construction outfit that had been trying to muscle into Ethan's territory for months. The other carried himself with the swagger of someone who thought he was untouchable. "Ethan," the first one called, voice mocking. "Didn't expect to see you playing house out here." Ethan didn't answer. He simply stepped forward, placing himself fully between me and them. "Walk away," he said quietly. The second man laughed. "Or what? You gonna make a scene in front of your little charity case?" Ethan's voice dropped lower, dangerous now. "Last warning." I felt the shift in the air, the same cold weight I'd felt in the coffee shop. The men hesitated, looked at each other. Then without another word, they retreated to the sedan and drove off. Ethan exhaled slowly, shoulders still rigid. I touched his arm. "Are you okay?" He turned back to me. The mask had slipped again, raw, unguarded pain in his eyes. "I hate that you saw that," he said hoarsely. "I hate that any part of my world might ever touch you." I stepped closer. "It didn't. You stopped it." He looked down at me, really looked, and something inside him seemed to fracture. "Sarah," he whispered. Then he kissed me. It was slow at first, tentative, almost reverent. His hands framed my face as though I were made of glass. But when I rose onto my toes and kissed him back, soft, uncertain, then desperate, the kiss changed. It became something fierce, hungry, a collision of everything we had both been holding back. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine. "I'm sorry," he said, voice wrecked. "I didn't mean to," I whispered. "Don't apologize for wanting me." He pulled back just enough to look at me, eyes dark, tormented, burning. "I've never wanted anything the way I want you," he confessed. "And it terrifies me." "Me too," I admitted. We stood there in the wind, wrapped in each other's coats, hearts pounding in terrible, beautiful unison. Later that evening, after he drove me home and walked me to my door after he kissed me again, slow, lingering, full of unspoken promises, he left. I stood inside the cold apartment, fingers pressed to my lips, feeling the ghost of his mouth. For the first time in years, the darkness pressing against the windows didn't feel quite so heavy. And somewhere deep inside me, beneath the hunger, beneath the fear, beneath the years of being small, a small, fierce flame had begun to burn. The first contraction came on the morning of the 31st of October, 2025, just as the sky over North Las Vegas turned the bruised purple of pre-dawn. I was at the folding table, wrapped in the same thin blanket that had become my constant companion, trying to finish one last batch of medical billing forms before the holiday weekend. The pain started low, a dull cramp I first mistook for hunger, another familiar ache in a body that had learned to ignore such things. By 8 o'clock, the cramps had sharpened into something deliberate. I stood, pressed a hand to my lower back, and breathed through it the way the free online videos had taught me. The baby was early, too early, but not impossible. 36 weeks. The doctor had warned me the last time I could afford a visit that stress, malnutrition, and chronic exhaustion increased the risk. I had listened, nodded politely, and gone home to another night of shivering under one blanket while the wind howled through the gaps around the window. I managed to send the completed forms before the next contraction hit stronger, longer, forcing me to grip the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. The room tilted. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cold. I reached for my phone with shaking fingers. Ethan answered on the first ring. "Sarah, I think..." My voice cracked. "I think it's time. Where are you, home?" "The contractions, they're maybe 12 minutes apart now." "I'm sorry, I know it's early, I didn't mean..." "Stay exactly where you are. I'm coming." The line went dead. I tried to gather what little I had, the hospital bag I'd packed from thrift store finds. A few onesies, one receiving blanket, a single package of newborn diapers bought with the first week signing bonus. My hands shook so badly the zipper caught twice. Another contraction rolled through me. I leaned against the wall, slid slowly to the floor, and focused on breathing. The apartment was silent except for my ragged exhales and the distant wail of a siren somewhere far off on the freeway. I felt small, powerless, terrified that after everything, the cold nights, the hunger, the endless humiliation, this child might arrive into the same broken world I'd tried so hard to escape. The knock came 8 minutes later, urgent but controlled. I crawled to the door, unlocked it, and Ethan was there. He took one look at me, curled on the floor, pale, sweating, clutching my belly, and something fierce and fractured crossed his face. He dropped to his knees beside me without hesitation, coat falling open to reveal the charcoal suit beneath. "How far apart now?" 10 minutes. Maybe less. He slipped one arm behind my back, the other under my knees, and lifted me as though I weighed nothing. The strength in his arms was shocking, steady, unyielding. I buried my face against his shoulder, inhaling the clean scent of expensive wool and faint cologne, and felt the first sob break free. "I've got you," he murmured against my hair. "I've got both of you." The SUV waited at the curb engine, running hazard lights flashing. One of his men opened the back door. Ethan settled me inside, climbed in beside me, and pulled me against his side as the vehicle surged into traffic. Every bump in the road sent fresh pain radiating through me. I gripped his hand, nails digging in. He didn't flinch. Instead, he pressed his lips to my temple and whispered things I could barely hear over the roaring in my ears, promises in a voice that trembled at the edges. "I should have moved you sooner," he said, almost to himself. "I should have gotten you out of that apartment weeks ago. I was trying to give you space, trying not to overwhelm you, but I was selfish. I was afraid if I pushed too hard, you'd run." I shook my head against his chest. "You've already given me everything." "Not enough," he answered, voice raw. "Never enough." Baptist Hospital appeared through the tinted windows, glass and concrete glowing against the early morning sky. A team waited at the emergency entrance, wheelchair nurses, a doctor already gloved. Ethan carried me from the car to the chair, only relinquishing me when the nurse gently insisted. They moved fast monitors, IV line questions I answered in gasps. Ethan stayed. He answered when I couldn't. He held my hand through every check, every spike of pain. When the doctor asked if he was the father, he didn't hesitate. "I'm staying," he said simply. "Whatever she needs." Labor progressed faster than anyone expected. The contractions came in relentless waves. I lost track of time, only Ethan's voice anchoring me. He spoke softly, steadily, old American folk songs his mother used to sing, fragments of Johnny Cash ballads about walking the line and rings of fire. His free hand rested on my belly between pains, thumb tracing slow circles as though he could will the baby to safety through touch alone. At one point, the pain became so blinding I cried out raw animal sound. Ethan leaned close, forehead against mine. "You're the strongest person I've ever known," he whispered. "You've carried this child alone through hell. Now let me carry some of it for you." I clung to him, tears streaming, and felt something inside me finally give way, not defeat but surrender. Trust. the terrifying, beautiful realization that I didn't have to do this by myself anymore. 4 hours after we arrived, the room filled with more people, more voices, more urgency. Time to push Sarah. I pushed. Again. Again. Ethan held both my hands now, his face inches from mine, eyes locked on me with an intensity that burned away everything else. One final shattering push, then a cry. High, furious, perfect. The doctor lifted a small, red-faced boy into the air. It's a boy, 6 pounds 1 ounce, small but strong. They placed him on my chest, warm, slippery, alive. I touched his tiny face with trembling fingers, tears falling onto his dark hair. Hey, little one, I whispered. Hey, Mason. The name had come to me weeks ago, quiet and certain. Mason, strong, steady like stone. Ethan stood frozen a few feet away, staring at the baby with an expression I'd never seen on him before. Raw wonder, unguarded, longing, something close to grief. The nurse showed him how to support the head, how to cradle the fragile body. When she transferred Mason into his arms, Ethan exhaled like a man who'd been holding his breath for years. He's perfect, he said, voice cracking. He's perfect. He walked slowly back to the bed, lowered himself beside me, and placed Mason between us, half on my chest, half on his. I looked up at Ethan. His eyes were wet. His jaw worked as though he were fighting a war inside himself. I never thought. He swallowed hard. I never let myself imagine this. A child. A family. Someone who looks at me without fear. I reached up, brushed a tear from his cheek. He's looking at you now. Mason's tiny fist opened and closed against Ethan's shirt. Ethan caught it gently, pressed it to his lips. I'll protect him, he said, voice low and fierce. I'll protect both of you, whatever it costs. I believed him. Later, after the nurses had cleaned us up, after they'd moved us to a private room with soft light and warm blankets, Ethan sat beside the bed, holding Mason while I rested. He sang quiet, rough, the same Johnny Cash ballad from the delivery room. His voice trembled on the high notes, but he didn't stop. I watched them, my son, and the man who had stepped into our lives like a storm, and somehow become shelter. Exhaustion pulled at me, heavy and sweet. Before I drifted off, Ethan leaned close, pressed a kiss to my forehead. I love you, he whispered so softly, I almost thought I'd dreamed it. I've loved you since the moment I saw you trying to disappear in that coffee shop, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you both. I reached for his hand, squeezed it weakly. I believe you, I murmured. And for the first time since the day I'd discovered I was pregnant, cold, alone, terrified, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, the world could be kind. Mason was 11 days old when the first real shadow fell across the fragile new world we had begun to build. It was still the 11th of November, 2025, barely 2 weeks since his birth, and the private suite at Baptist Hospital had given way to Ethan's home in Summerlin, a sprawling modern house perched on a ridge, overlooking the city lights. I had protested at first, voice soft and uncertain, saying I didn't want to impose, didn't want to take more than I already had. Ethan had simply looked at me with those storm-gray eyes and said, "This isn't charity, Sarah. This is where you and our son belong now." Our son. He said it without hesitation, without qualification every time. The words still stole my breath. The house was everything my old apartment had never been, warm, quiet, safe. Heated floors that never let the cold seep in. A nursery already prepared crib with soft gray linens, changing table stocked with more diapers than I had ever seen in one place, rocking chair upholstered in cream velvet. Ethan had arranged it all while I was in labor, calling in favors with quiet urgency. When the nurse wheeled me out of the hospital, he carried Mason in his arms and guided me to the waiting SUV as though I were made of porcelain. The first few days blurred into exhausted wonder. Mason nursed every 2 hours. I barely slept, old habit from too many cold, hungry nights, but now the exhaustion felt different. Purposeful. Ethan was always there. He took the midnight feedings when my arms trembled from fatigue, cradling Mason against his broad chest, and singing those same rough Johnny Cash lullabies until the baby's cries softened into sleep. He changed diapers with careful precision, washed bottles, folded tiny onesies with the same steady hands that had once silenced men in dark parking lots. I watched him from the doorway one night, 3 a.m, city lights glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows, and felt something inside me tear wide open. This powerful, wealthy man who could command rooms with a single look was humming Ring of Fire to my son like it was the most natural thing in the world. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall. That night after Mason was settled, Ethan found me standing in the hallway, arms wrapped around myself. He didn't speak at first. Just walked up behind me, slipped his arms around my waist, and rested his chin on my shoulder. "You're crying," he murmured. "I'm happy," I whispered back. "I'm so happy it hurts." He turned me gently, cupped my face in his hands. "I've spent years convincing myself I didn't deserve anything soft," he said, voice low and rough. That softness makes you weak, that it gets taken away. But holding you, holding him, it's like every wall I built is crumbling and I don't want to stop it. I want it to burn. He kissed me, then slow, deep, reverent. The kind of kiss that said everything words couldn't. When we parted, his forehead rested against mine. I love you, he said again. More every day. More than I know how to carry. The words wrapped around my heart like warm hands. But safety, I was learning, was never permanent in Ethan's world. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. I had finally ventured out first time since the hospital. Ethan insisted on a short walk, fresh air for Mason and me. We chose a quiet residential street near the house stroller between us, his arm around my shoulders. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of desert sage. We were 2 blocks from home when the black SUV pulled up slow, deliberate, blocking the sidewalk. 3 men stepped out. Expensive coats, hard eyes. The leader, mid-40s, silver at the temples, smiled without warmth. "Ethan Caldwell," he said. "We've been trying to reach you." Ethan's body went rigid beside me. He moved so that Mason's stroller was behind him, me half shielded by his frame. "Marco," he said to the man. "This isn't the place." Marco's smile widened. "We thought maybe a family outing would make you more receptive. Your new arrangement with the city council is cutting into our revenue streams. We'd like to renegotiate." I felt the blood drain from my face. My arms tightened around the stroller handles. Ethan's voice dropped to something lethal and quiet. "You touch them, you die." Marco raised both hands in mock surrender. "No need for dramatics. We're reasonable men. But reasonable men get impatient when ignored." A second SUV appeared at the opposite end of the street, Ethan's security team. Doors opened silently. Men emerged calm, coordinated. Marco glanced at them, then back at Ethan. "Think about it," he said. "We'll be in touch." They retreated. The SUVs drove away. I couldn't breathe. My knees buckled. Ethan caught me, one arm around my waist, the other steadying the stroller. "Sarah, look at me." I did. His face was pale, jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped. "They won't touch you," he said. "I swear it." But his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, were haunted. That night, after Mason was asleep in the nursery, Ethan paced the living room like a caged animal. The city lights glittered beyond the windows, indifferent. I sat on the couch, knees drawn up, watching him. "They wanted to use us," I said softly. "To hurt you." He stopped, turned. "Yes," the word was torn from him. "I should have told you sooner," he said. "The casino syndicates, the ones that run the underground sports books, the private poker rooms, they've been pushing into construction territory for months. I've been blocking them, quietly. They're escalating." He sank onto the couch beside me, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "I thought I could keep you separate," he whispered. "I thought if I moved fast enough, if I legitimized enough of the business. But I was wrong. And now you and Mason are in the crosshairs because of me." The guilt in his voice was violent, self-directed, merciless. I reached for him. My hand on his arm felt small against the tension there. "You didn't ask for this," I said. "You didn't ask for any of it." He looked at me, eyes wet, tormented. "I asked for you," he said. "The moment I saw you, I asked for you. And now I've put you in danger." I moved closer, climbed into his lap without thinking, arms around his neck. "Then protect us," I whispered. "The way you've protected me every day since that coffee shop." He buried his face against my shoulder. His body shook, once hard, silent. "I will," he said against my skin. "I'll burn every bridge. I'll make deals with devils I swore I'd never touch again. But I'll keep you safe." 2 days later, he left for a meeting. He didn't tell me where, only that it was necessary. I waited at home, new home, with Mason asleep in the nursery, security discreetly stationed outside. The house was warm. The refrigerator was full. The bed had clean sheets every day. And still I felt the old terror creeping back, the terror of losing what little I had. When Ethan returned at 2 a.m, his coat smelled of cigar smoke and winter air. His face was drawn, eyes shadowed. He found me in the nursery, rocking Mason, even though the baby was already asleep. He sank to his knees beside the chair. "They agreed," he said quietly. "Family members off limits. No civilians. No children. It cost territory. It cost favors. I'll be paying back for years." But they agreed. Relief crashed through me so hard I gasped. He rested his forehead against my knee. "I would have given them everything," he whispered. "Every dollar. Every deal. To keep you both safe." I threaded my fingers through his hair. "You already have," I said. He looked up at me, raw, undone. Then he rose, lifted me from the chair, careful, reverent, and carried me to our bedroom. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. That night we came together with a desperation that bordered on worship, slow, fierce trembling. Every touch said what words couldn't. I'm yours. I'm here. I'll fight the world for you. Afterward, tangled in sheets that smelled of him, I listened to his heartbeat, steady, powerful mine. I love you, I whispered into the dark. His arms tightened around me. I've loved you since the moment you looked at me like I might be salvation, he answered. And I'll love you until the day I stop breathing. Outside, the city glittered, cold, indifferent, full of danger. Inside, we held each other like lifelines. And for the first time, the darkness felt a little less absolute. By the middle of December 2025, the house in Summerlin had become more than shelter. It had become home in the quiet, aching way that only something you never dared dream of can feel. Mason was 6 weeks old now, stronger every day, his dark eyes already searching for us the moment he woke. The nursery smelled of baby powder and fresh laundry. The crib sheets were changed daily. The refrigerator held bottles I no longer had to warm in a sink full of lukewarm tap water. I still woke at every small sound. Old instincts from too many nights listening for footsteps in the hallway outside my old apartment. But now the sounds were safe. Ethan's low voice singing to Mason at 3 a.m, the soft creak of the rocking chair, the hum of the heater that never once let the cold in. I had gained weight slowly, carefully. My cheeks were less hollow, my arms less fragile. Ethan noticed everything. He brought trays of food to the nursery when I was nursing, sat beside me while I ate, watched me with eyes that still carried that same tormented hunger from the first day. He touched me constantly. Small brushes of fingers along my wrist, palm resting on the small of my back, forehead kisses that lingered longer each time. The love between us had become something living, fierce, almost violent in its tenderness. We moved around each other like people who knew the world could take this away at any moment and were determined to savor every second. On the 20th of December, Ethan asked me to marry him. He waited until after Mason was asleep. The house was quiet except for the soft crackle of the gas fireplace in the living room. City lights glittered beyond the windows like scattered diamonds. He led me to the terrace blankets already draped over the outdoor sofa, a small heater glowing beside it. Snow had dusted the ridge earlier. The air smelled clean and cold. He wrapped me in his coat, first still warm from his body, then sat beside me and pulled me into his lap. I felt the small velvet box before I saw it. He opened it without flourish. A simple platinum band. A single diamond, clear, brilliant, modest in size, but perfect in cut. "Sarah," he said, voice low and rough, "I've spent my life collecting things, buildings, contracts, power. None of it ever felt like enough. Then I found you. And suddenly everything I owned seemed small. I don't want to own anything else. I want to belong to you. To Mason. To whatever children come after. Will you marry me?" Tears came before words. I nodded against his chest, unable to speak. He slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Then he kissed me deep, slow, trembling with everything he had held back for months. We made love that night in front of the fire, quiet, reverent, desperate. Every touch felt like a vow. The wedding was planned for New Year's Eve, small, private at the house. Only his sisters, a handful of trusted people, the officiant, and Marco's security team discreetly positioned around the property. No press, no spectacle, just us. The morning of the 31st, Sophia helped me dress in the master bedroom. The gown was ivory silk, simple flowing, with enough room for the softness my body still carried after giving birth. My hair was loose, small white flowers tucked into the waves. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Sophia adjusted one of the flowers. "You're beautiful," she said quietly. "And he's never looked at anyone the way he looks at you." Downstairs, the garden had been transformed. Simple arch of white roses overlooking the city tables set with candles and winter greens heaters keeping the chill away. Mason was in a tiny gray suit held by Maria, who kissed his cheek every few seconds. Ethan waited under the arched dark suit, no tie eyes fixed on the French doors. When they opened and I stepped out, he stopped breathing. I walked toward him on unsteady legs, still weak from childbirth, still remembering too many days of dizziness and hunger. But his gaze never wavered. It burned. The ceremony was brief. Traditional vows, then our own. Ethan spoke, first voice steady but thick. "I promise to love you even when I'm afraid. To protect you even when the world tells me I can't. To choose you every day over power, over safety, over everything. You gave me a reason to want more than survival. I'll spend my life earning the gift of you and our son." I swallowed tears. "I promise to love you even when you're overprotective," I said softly. "To trust you with my life and Mason's. To build this family with you no matter how complicated it gets. You saw me when I was invisible. You saved me when I couldn't save myself. I choose you. Every day. Forever. The officiant smiled. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Ethan kissed me deep, possessive, full of everything we had survived to reach this moment. Someone whistled. Mason made a small complaining sound. Everyone laughed. The reception was quiet. Cuban food from Ethan's favorite place in downtown, a small cake. Maria had insisted on baking herself. We ate. We talked. We held each other while the city glittered below. Later, as the sky darkened and fireworks began in the distance, Ethan pulled me aside. I have to go to a meeting tonight, he said quietly. The syndicates want to finalize the last details of the truce. It shouldn't take long, 2 hours at most. I'll be back before midnight. I felt the old fear flicker. On our wedding night, I know. His thumb brushed my cheek. I hate it, but if I don't show it, looks like weakness. And weakness invites trouble. I nodded, throat tight. Be careful. He kissed me again, lingering fierce. I'll be back before the clock strikes 12 Cinderella. He left with most of his security detail. Marco stayed behind with 2 men positioned around the perimeter. I changed into comfortable clothes, soft sweater leggings, fed Mason, rocked him to sleep. Sophia and Maria stayed helping clean up, laughing quietly about wedding stories. I was in the nursery changing Mason's diaper when I heard it. Glass breaking downstairs, sharp, unmistakable. Then shouting. My blood turned to ice. I scooped Mason against my chest, heart slamming so hard I could barely breathe. Footsteps too many too fast thundered up the stairs. Marco's voice cut through the chaos, urgent, controlled. Mrs. Caldwell, stay in the nursery. Lock the door. I backed toward the door, Mason, beginning to fuss against my shoulder. The knob rattled. Then a voice I knew too well, slurred, furious. Where is she? Where's Sarah Derrick? Somehow, impossibly, Derrick had found us. The door shuddered under a hard blow. I locked it with shaking hands, backed away, pressed myself against the far wall with Mason cradled tight. More blows. Wood splintered. I fumbled for my phone, dropped it once, hands slick with fear, then hit record. Derrick, I called through the door, voice trembling but loud enough for the microphone. You're trespassing. The police are coming. He laughed, ugly, broken. You think I care about police? I came for my family. You stole my life, Sarah. Ran off with some rich thug and think you're better than me now. The door cracked under another impact. I positioned myself between the door and the crib phone, still recording. You abused me for years, I said, voice shaking but clear. You mocked me when I was pregnant. You tried to take my child with lies. You lost any right to us the moment you chose cruelty. Another crash. The lock gave. Derrick stumbled through red-faced drunk tire iron in his hand. He saw me. Saw Mason. His eyes narrowed. You think your criminal husband can protect you forever, I stood my ground. I think you're about to find out what happens when you threaten someone who's finally not afraid. Marco appeared in the doorway behind him, weapon-drawn voice calm and lethal. Drop it. Now. Derrick spun, raised the tire iron. Marco moved swift, professional. Within seconds, Derrick was face down, hands secured, the tire iron kicked away. I turned away, sank to the floor with Mason against my chest, rocking him as he cried. Sophia rushed in moments later, Maria right behind. They took in the scene, Derrick being dragged out, me shaking on the floor, Mason wailing. Sophia knelt beside me. Are you hurt? No, I whispered. We're okay. I held up the phone, still recording. I got everything. Police sirens grew closer. Ethan arrived 20 minutes later, meeting abandoned the moment Marco texted him. He burst into the nursery, face pale with fury and fear. He dropped to his knees beside us, pulled us both into his arms, checking for injuries with shaking hands. Are you okay? His voice broke. Is Mason? We're fine, I said against his chest. Marco handled it. I recorded everything. He looked at the phone in my hand, then back at me, pride and anguish warring in his eyes. You protected him, he whispered. You stood your ground. I learned from the best. He kissed my forehead, then Mason's, held us tighter. I should have been here. You left us with security, and your sisters. And I handled it. I pulled back to meet his gaze. I'm not the scared woman from that coffee shop anymore, Ethan. I protected our son. And I got evidence that will keep Derrick away for years. His eyes filled. He kissed me soft, trembling, full of everything he couldn't say. But in the quiet afterward, while police took statements and Derrick was led away in cuffs, Ethan held me on the nursery floor and whispered against my hair. Some wedding night. I laughed, shaky, tear-soaked. Not what I pictured. He brushed hair from my face. But you were incredible. And I'm never leaving you again. Not for meetings. Not for anything. That's not realistic, I said gently. I don't care. His arms tightened. You're too important. Both of you. Outside, fireworks lit the sky, bright, fleeting, beautiful. Inside, we sat together in the wreckage of the night, holding our son, holding each other. And somehow, impossibly, the darkness felt smaller than it ever had before. The days after the wedding night blurred into a strange, fragile peace. Derek was gone, taken away in handcuffs, the recording from my phone serving as the final nail in the coffin of his threats. The prosecutor called it an airtight case, breaking and entering attempted assault with a deadly weapon violation of the existing restraining order and a pattern of harassment backed by months of documented filings. With the evidence and witnesses, including Sophia and Maria, Derek faced years behind bars. The judge denied bail. For the first time since the divorce, I breathed without the constant weight of his shadow pressing against my ribs. It was the 3rd of January 2026 when the world tilted again. Ethan had been quieter than usual that week, distracted during meals, slipping out for calls he didn't explain, waking before dawn to pace the terrace overlooking the city. I noticed the faint tremor in his hands when he held Mason, the way he pressed a palm to his chest, as though testing something fragile beneath the skin. I asked once softly, timidly, if he was all right. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said it was just business stress. I believed him because I wanted to. That morning I found him in the kitchen at 6 o'clock, staring out the window at the pale winter sunrise, coffee untouched in his hand. His face was gray, sweat beaded along his hairline despite the cool air. Ethan. He turned too quickly. The mug slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. I flinched at the sound, old instincts from too many things breaking in my old life. He dropped to his knees to clean it up, movements jerky, breathing shallow. I knelt beside him. "You're shaking." "I'm fine," he said, too fast, too sharp. Then softer. "I'm fine, Sarah." But he wasn't. By noon, he had collapsed in the hallway outside the nursery, right after changing Mason's diaper, right after kissing the top of our son's head and whispering he loved him. I heard the thud from the living room. I ran. He was on the floor, conscious but pale, hand pressed to his chest, eyes wide with something close to terror. I screamed for Marco. The security team moved like lightning. Ethan was in the SUV and on the way to the hospital before I could finish buckling Mason into his car seat. Sophia met us there. Maria arrived minutes later. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and fear. The cardiologist was kind but direct. Arrhythmia severe, unpredictable. An irregular rhythm that had been silent for years and now roared like a storm. Stress, exhaustion, the weight of constant vigilance had finally cracked something vital inside him. Surgery was scheduled for the next morning. Without it, the risk of sudden cardiac arrest grew with every passing day. I sat beside his hospital bed that night, while Mason slept in a portable bassinet. Ethan looked smaller beneath the thin blanket, fair skin, almost translucent, eyes shadowed. "I should have told you," he whispered. "I've known something was wrong for months. Chest pain, dizziness. I ignored it. Told myself I could handle it. I always handle it. Why didn't you go to a doctor? Because if I admitted weakness, the syndicates would smell blood. And if they came for me," his voice cracked, "they'd come for you. For Mason. I couldn't risk it." I took his hand. His fingers were cold. "You're not weak," I said softly. "You're human." He looked at me, eyes wet, tormented. "I've spent my life pretending otherwise. Building walls. Collecting power so no one could touch me. Then you walked into that coffee shop and everything I'd built started crumbling. I didn't want to stop it. I wanted to let it fall. But I was terrified that if I let myself be human, I'd lose you both." I leaned forward, pressed my forehead to his. "You won't lose us. We're here. We're staying." He exhaled a broken, shuddering sound. "I'm going to fix this," he said. "After the surgery, I'm accelerating everything. Legitimizing the construction companies. Walking away from the rest. I don't care what it costs. I don't care who it angers. I want to be here for you, for Mason, for whatever comes next." Tears slipped down my cheeks. I kissed him soft, trembling, full of everything we had survived. The surgery lasted 5 hours. I sat in the waiting room with Sophia and Maria, Mason asleep against my chest while the clock ticked past every minute like a heartbeat. When the doctor finally emerged, tired but smiling, I felt the air rush back into my lungs. The procedure worked. A small device now regulated his heart rhythm. Recovery would be long weeks of rest, months of monitoring, but he would live. He woke in the recovery room, groggy, disoriented, reaching for me the moment he saw me. I climbed onto the narrow bed beside him, careful of the wires and tubes, and held him while he cried, silent, wrenching tears that shook his whole body. "I was so afraid," he whispered against my neck. "I thought I'd never hold you again." "Never hold him." "You're here," I said. "You're still here." He pulled back just enough to look at me, eyes red-rimmed, raw. "I love you," he said. "More than I ever thought I could love anyone. And I'm sorry for every moment I made you wait." For every risk I brought into your life, for every time I pretended I didn't need help." I brushed tears from his cheeks. "I love you too," I whispered. "Exactly as you are, broken parts and all." Recovery was slow. Ethan hated the stillness, hated the enforced rest, hated the way his body betrayed him. But he adapted. He held Mason for hours, sang to him, read him picture books in that rough, beautiful voice. He worked from the home office, phone calls, contracts, plans to sell off the shadowed parts of his empire. One evening in mid-January, snow falling softly outside the windows, he found me in the nursery, rocking Mason to sleep. He stood in the doorway, still pale, still healing, but steady. "I spoke to the lawyers today," he said quietly. "The last of the underground operations will be gone by spring. Clean. Legitimate. No more shadows." I looked up at him, heart full. He crossed the room, knelt beside the rocking chair, rested his head against my knee. "I was afraid of losing power," he said. "But the only power I ever really needed was right here." I threaded my fingers through his hair. "You didn't lose anything," I whispered. "You gained everything." He looked up at me, eyes shining with tears and something deeper. "I'm going to marry you again someday," he said. "Properly, when I can stand in front of the world and promise you forever without fear." I smiled through my own tears. I already said yes. He rose, kissed me slow, deep, full of quiet triumph. And in that moment, with our son sleeping between us and the city lights glittering below the past, finally felt defeated. Not gone, not erased, but small, distant, powerless against what we had built. By the first week of March 2026, the house in Summerlin felt like it had always been ours. The winter had been gentle, rare snowfalls that melted by noon, leaving only the memory of cold on the windows. Ethan's recovery moved forward in careful steps. Daily walks along the ridge trail with Mason in the stroller. Follow-up appointments where the cardiologist nodded approvingly at the steady rhythm on the monitor. Quiet evenings where he held our son and read aloud from worn paperbacks of American classics his mother had loved. He had kept his promise. The last of the shadowed contracts were sold or dissolved. Meetings that once took place in back rooms now happened in glass-walled offices downtown. The construction empire, clean, legitimate, vast, grew under his hands like something finally allowed to breathe. The security remained discreet but constant, a reminder that peace was negotiated, not guaranteed. But the air felt lighter. The nights were warmer. And every time Ethan looked at me, the love in his eyes burned brighter than any fear that had come before. I was 14 weeks pregnant when I felt the first flutter, 2 small lives moving inside me at once. The ultrasound confirmed it on a clear Tuesday morning: twins, a boy and a girl. The technician smiled, pointed out the 2 heartbeats flickering on the screen like twin stars. Ethan's hand tightened around mine until it hurt, but neither of us cared. We cried in the car on the way home, quiet, shaking tears of joy and terror. Twins. 2 more small hearts depending on us. 2 more reasons to keep the world at bay. Ethan pulled the SUV to the side of the road overlooking the valley, turned off the engine, and gathered me against him. "I'm scared," he admitted, voice rough against my hair. "I thought 1 child would be the limit of what I could protect. Now 3. And you carrying them." His voice broke. I cupped his face, thumbs brushing the damp tracks on his cheeks. "We'll carry them together," I whispered. "Like we carried Mason. Like we carried each other." He kissed me then, deep, desperate, full of everything he still fought to forgive himself for. When we parted, he rested his forehead against mine. "I'm going to be better," he said. "For all of you. I swear it." The pregnancy progressed quickly, faster than with Mason. My body remembered how to grow life, but it also remembered how close it had come to breaking before. Exhaustion returned in waves. Dizziness struck without warning. Some mornings I woke so nauseated I could barely stand. Ethan noticed every change. He canceled meetings without hesitation. He carried trays of ginger tea and saltines to the bedroom. He rubbed my feet when they swelled, held ice packs to my lower back, whispered apologies and promises into my skin. One night in late April, when the twins were restless and sleep refused to come, I found him on the terrace staring at the city lights. His shoulders were tense, hands gripping the railing so hard the knuckles stood white. I wrapped my arms around him from behind, pressed my cheek to his back. "You're thinking about them again," I said softly. "The people you used to deal with." He exhaled a long, shuddering sound. "I keep waiting for the other shoe," he said. "For someone to decide the truce isn't enough. For someone to look at our family and see leverage." I turned him gently, looked up into those storm-gray eyes that had once terrified men, and now only ever looked at me with aching tenderness. "Then we'll face it together," I said, "like everything else." He pulled me close, buried his face in my hair. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "I never did. But I'm too selfish to let you go." The twins arrived early, 35 weeks, on a warm evening in June. Labor came fast and furious. Ethan was beside me through every contraction, every push, every tear. The delivery room filled with the sound of two cries, strong, indignant, perfect. Noah came first, dark hair, fierce little frown. Isabella followed minutes later, smaller, quieter, already searching for her brother's voice. They placed them on my chest together, two tiny warm bodies, two sets of lungs filling with air, two hearts beating against mine. Ethan stood frozen at the bedside, tears streaming down his face, hands shaking so hard the nurse had to guide them when she handed him his daughter. He sank onto the edge of the bed, gathered us all close, me, Noah, Isabella, and wept openly. No shame, no restraint, just raw, overwhelming love. "I'm here," he kept whispering. "I'm here. I'm never leaving." The weeks that followed were a beautiful chaos. Sleepless nights broken by two sets of cries instead of one. Bottles warmed at 3 a.m. Diapers changed in tandem. Ethan learned to juggle 2 infants with the same quiet competence he once used to manage boardrooms and backroom deals. He sang to them Johnny Cash folk songs, fragments of lullabies his mother had taught him, his voice rough but steady, soothing them both into sleep. One afternoon in early July, I found him on the nursery floor with all 3 children. Mason, now crawling with determination, was stacking blocks between his siblings' bassinets. Noah and Isabella lay on their backs, tiny fists, waving eyes fixed on their father as he spoke softly to them. "You're going to be strong," he told them. "Not because you have to be, but because we'll give you the space to choose who you want to be." He looked up when he felt me watching. His eyes softened love so deep it almost hurt to see. "Come here," he said. I sank onto the floor beside him. He pulled me into his lap, wrapped his arms around me, rested his chin on my shoulder. "I used to think power was control," he murmured. "Control over people, over outcomes, over fear. But this quiet, messy, perfect thing we have, this is the only real power I've ever known." I turned in his arms, kissed him, slow, deep, full of gratitude and wonder. "We made this," I whispered. "From nothing. From cold nights and broken promises and too many tears." He smiled small, real, radiant. "We did." Outside the desert, sun burned bright. Inside, our children slept. The city glittered below, still full of danger, still full of possibility, but for the first time it felt far away. Peace, I was learning, was not the absence of shadows. It was the courage to stand in the light anyway, and we stood together, fragile, fierce, unbreakable. The summer slipped away in a haze of sleepless nights and small miracles. By late August 2025, Noah and Isabella were 3 months old, round-cheeked, bright-eyed, already smiling at the sound of their father's voice. Mason, now toddling with stubborn determination, had claimed the role of big brother with fierce protectiveness, patting their tiny heads and offering them his favorite stuffed bear whenever they fussed. The house in Summerlin hummed with life. The nursery had become a sanctuary of soft light and gentle lullabies. Ethan moved through the days with a quiet joy that still startled me, watching him change diapers, warm bottles, rock 2 infants at once while Mason clung to his leg. He had become softer around the edges, the sharp lines of his face gentling when he looked at us. The surgery scar on his chest, a thin pink line, was a constant reminder of how close we had come to losing him, and he touched it absently, sometimes as though reassuring himself he was still here. But peace, I was learning, had its own shadows. I found the file on a rainy Tuesday morning in early September. Ethan had left for a final meeting downtown. Something about transferring the last offshore account, he said. He kissed me goodbye, kissed each of the children, and promised he'd be home by lunch. The house was quiet except for the soft patter of rain against the windows and the occasional coo from the twins in their playpen. I was tidying his office, nothing more than stacking papers, wiping the desk when the folder slipped from beneath a stack of contracts. Thick manila. No label. Just my name, Sarah Caldwell, typed in the corner. I should have left it alone. I didn't. Inside were photographs, grainy time-stamped, taken from a distance. Derek Harlan, thinner than I remembered, hair longer and unkempt, sitting in what looked like a concrete room with no windows. Another shot, the same room, Derek speaking to someone off-camera, mouth open in what looked like argument. Transcripts followed, pages of dated conversations. Derek's voice transcribed in cold black ink. Confessions. Dates of every time he had harassed me after the divorce. Admissions of forging the paternity documents. Details of how he had tracked me after I moved. Names of people he had paid to follow me. Dates and amounts. Everything. And at the bottom of the stack, a single sheet of paper, a medical examiner's report. Derek Harlan. Cause of death, cardiac arrest, secondary to prolonged stress and malnutrition. Date 4 weeks earlier. My knees gave out. I sank into Ethan's chair, the folder spilling across the desk. The room spun. Nausea rose sharp and hot in my throat. He hadn't sent Derek to prison. He had kept him. Somewhere. Hidden. Questioned. Broken. For months, I pressed both hands to my mouth to stifle the sob that clawed up my throat. The twins fussed in the next room. Small, confused sounds. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The front door opened downstairs. Footsteps slow familiar climbed the stairs. Ethan appeared in the doorway. He saw the folder. Saw my face. The color drained from his skin. Sarah, how long? My voice came out small, cracked. How long did you keep him? He didn't lie. He never lied to me. Since the night he broke in, he said quietly. After the police took him, Marco's team intercepted the transport. We moved him to a secure facility in the desert. I needed certainty. That he would never come near you again. That he would never hurt you or Mason or the twins. I stared at him, my husband, the man who had held me through labor, who had sung lullabies to our children, who had wept in a hospital bed promising to change everything. You kept him alive, I whispered. You questioned him. You made him confess. Yes. And then you let him die. Ethan closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet, tormented. I didn't touch him, he said. I never laid a hand on him. But I didn't stop it either. I let the isolation do the work. The guilt. The knowledge that he had lost everything. When the doctor said his heart was failing, I could have called an ambulance. I didn't. The room was silent except for the rain and the soft crying of the twins. Why, I asked, voice breaking. Because every time I looked at you, every time I saw the fear still lingering in your eyes when you woke from nightmares, I remembered what he did. And I wanted him to feel even a fraction of that terror. I wanted him to know what it was like to be powerless. He took a step toward me. I flinched. The movement tore something inside him. He stopped, hands falling to his sides. I became what I hated, he said, voice raw. I told myself it was for you. For our family. But it was for me. For the part of me that still needed revenge. And now I've lost you. I stood on shaking legs. The folder lay between us like a wound. You lied to me, I said. You looked me in the eye every day, and lied. Yes. I walked past him, slow, unsteady, into the nursery. I lifted Noah first, then Isabella held them both against my chest. Mason toddled over, confused, reaching for me. Ethan stood in the doorway, not daring to enter. I'm leaving, I said quietly. I need time, space, to understand what this means. He nodded once, slow, defeated. I'll arrange everything, he said. A safe place, security, whatever you need. I don't want your security, I whispered. I want the truth. I packed a small bag clothes for me and the children, the few things that mattered. Ethan watched from the hallway, silent, broken. When the car arrived, driven by Marco, who looked at Ethan with something close to pity, I walked past my husband without touching him. The safe house was small, clean, in a quiet neighborhood far from the strip. No luxury, just safety. I put the children to bed in a room that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Then I sat on the edge of the mattress and cried deep, wrenching sobs that shook my whole body. Hours later, the doorbell rang. I opened it. Ethan stood on the step, rain-soaked coat, dripping eyes red-rimmed. I can't breathe without you, he said. I can't think. I can't sleep. I know what I did was unforgivable. I know I crossed a line I swore I'd never cross. But I'm begging you, let me try to make it right. I stared at him, the man who had saved me, who had loved me, who had become a monster in the name of protecting me. I hate what you did, I whispered. I hate it too, he answered. I stepped back. He entered. We stood in the small living room, rain drumming against the windows. Then he sank to his knees. I'll spend the rest of my life earning your trust again, he said. If you never forgive me, I'll understand. But please don't leave me in the dark. I looked down at him, powerful, wealthy, broken, and something inside me cracked. I knelt too. We met in the middle foreheads, touching, tears mingling. I love you, I whispered. Even now, even after this. His arms came around me, shaking, desperate. We kissed, raw, angry, grieving, healing. We made love on the floor of that small, borrowed house, fierce, tear-soaked, full of pain and forgiveness. Every touch was an apology. Every sigh was a promise. When it was over, we lay tangled together, breathing hard. I'll never lie to you again, he said against my skin. I believe you, I answered. And in that moment, rain falling, children sleeping, hearts broken and mending, the world felt possible again. Fragile, but possible. The rain had stopped by the time the first sirens wailed in the distance on that cold morning of January 11th, 2026. Ethan had barely slept, pacing the living room of the safe house since dawn. Phone pressed to his ear, voice low and urgent, as he spoke to lawyers to Marco. To anyone who could still pull strings in a world he was trying to leave behind. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed, Noah and Isabella asleep in their portable cribs, Mason curled against my side, his small hand clutching my shirt. The knock came at 7:43, hard official. Federal agents. Badges flashed in the dim hallway light. They had warrants, wiretap transcripts, bank records, names of men who had once worked for Ethan and now spoke against him. A mole inside his circle had delivered everything needed for a sweeping indictment. Ethan stood in the doorway, shoulders squared, face calm in the way only a man who had prepared for this moment for years could be. But his hands trembled when he reached for me. "They're taking me in," he said quietly. "I'll cooperate. I'll give them everything they want on the parts I've already shut down. But the rest, the things I never told you about, they could mean life in prison." I felt the floor drop away. Nausea rose sharp and sudden. The room spun. I gripped Mason tighter to keep from falling. Ethan knelt in front of me, took my face between his hands. "I'm not running," he said. "I won't drag you or the children through years of trials, but I need you to know I love you. More than power, more than freedom, more than my own life." Tears burned my eyes. "I can't lose you." "You won't," he whispered. "I promise." The agents waited. Ethan kissed each of the children soft, lingering kisses on tiny foreheads. Then he kissed me deep, desperate, full of everything we had built and everything we might lose. When they led him away in handcuffs, he didn't look back. I sat on the floor for a long time after the door closed, holding our children, feeling the weight of a silence so deep it hurt to breathe. 2 days later, Sophia arrived at the safe house with a folder and a plan. "They have enough for a life sentence," she said bluntly, "but there's a narrow window, a closed-door hearing. If someone with direct knowledge testifies, someone who can separate the legitimate from the criminal, someone who can prove intent to exit the life, they might accept a plea. Reduced sentence. House arrest. Probation. He'd be home. Eventually." I stared at her. "Who would do that?" Sophia met my eyes. "You." The hearing was held in a small, windowless room on the 15th floor of the federal courthouse downtown. No cameras, no press, just the judge, 2 prosecutors, Ethan's defense attorney, and me. I wore the same gray hoodie I had worn the day we met in the coffee shop, worn thin at the elbows, faded from too many washes in cold water. My hands shook as I took the oath. Ethan sat across the room, wrists cuffed, eyes fixed on me with a mixture of agony and awe. The prosecutor asked questions. Hard ones. About the construction companies. About the money. About the men who had once worked for Ethan and now sat in prison themselves. I answered everything. Then came the moment that could destroy us both. "Did you ever witness illegal activity?" the prosecutor asked. I took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. "I witnessed a man who spent every waking hour trying to leave that world behind," I said softly. "I witnessed him sell off operations. I witnessed him refuse new deals. I witnessed him choose his family over power, even when it cost him everything he had built. If there were shadows in his past, I testify today that he walked out of them. Willingly. Completely." Silence followed, thick, heavy. The judge studied me for a long moment. Then he spoke. "Mr. Caldwell, your wife's testimony is compelling. Combined with the evidence of divestment and your cooperation, the court is prepared to accept a plea. 10 years probation. House arrest for the first 3. Full restitution. No prison time." Ethan's head dropped. His shoulders shook. When they removed the cuffs, he crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me into his arms so tightly I couldn't breathe. We didn't speak until we were alone in the hallway. He cupped my face, thumbs brushing away, tears I hadn't realized were falling. "You saved me," he whispered. "You could have walked away. You could have let them take everything. Instead, you gave me back my life." "I gave us back our life," I corrected, voice trembling. He kissed me slow, deep, full of gratitude and wonder, and something fiercer than either of us could name. Outside the courthouse, the city glittered under a pale winter sun. We walked to the car together, hand in hand, 3 children waiting at home, a future no longer written in shadows. Years later, the house in Summerlin still stood louder now, filled with the voices of growing children. Mason was in school, reading ahead of his grade. Noah and Isabella chased each other through the halls, laughing. Ethan worked legitimate, 12-hour days, came home every night, kissed his wife and his children, and never once looked back at the man he used to be. We taught them the same thing every day: love doesn't care about skin color. Love doesn't measure bank accounts. Love sees the heart first and stays. Knowledge is powerful. Knowledge gives us the strength to choose better. Knowledge helps us understand that every person carries both light and shadow. Knowledge reminds us that redemption is possible. Knowledge shows us that compassion can heal even the deepest wounds. Lesson after lesson, we learn together that true wealth is measured in trust, in forgiveness, in showing up every day. Lesson after lesson, we discovered that love is the greatest education of all. Lesson after lesson, we found that kindness is the only currency that never runs out. Lesson after lesson, we realized that family is built not by blood or money, but by choosing each other again and again. To everyone watching this video, may you be blessed with good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the YouTube channel Alex Truths for more engaging stories every day like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Tell us in the comments, how did this story make you feel? How does it connect to your own real life? I read every comment and truly want to hear the emotions from deep within your hearts. Goodbye for now, and I promise to see you again in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.